All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. We're here for another virtual discussion as part of the Big Sky training series. I'm AJ Oliver. I work at Big Sky as the Alpine training supervisor. And I've got Chris and Zoe with me here. I'll let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about them. But we have a discussion planned for you tonight, a technical discussion, Alpine discussion. But I'll pass it off to Zoe and Chris, let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Cool.
Hey everybody. I am Zoe. I'm the training manager here at Big Sky. Also on the Alpine Ed staff for NRM. So we're stoked that Chris wanted to chat some technical fundamentals and whatnot. And Chris, I'll let you kind of jump in, introduce yourself, and tell us why we're all here.
Well, thanks AJ and Zoe, and thanks for taking the time. I'm Chris Ohman. I'm a level 2 adult instructor at Big Sky, going into my 10th season, and I've been on the level 3 journey for several years. And as part of that, I have found that I think the various assessment activities are there for a really good reason. That people a lot smarter than me and a lot more experienced than me put them there to highlight specific fundamentals, to highlight where your skiing might be successful or maybe not successful, and how that can inform an examiner about whether you're meeting the level 3 skiing standard, and also where it is that you might and I might go with prescriptions for folks at very high end skiing so that they can be better skiers and pass the exam. So all I have done here, and I think what would be great if we can just kind of walk through, is I created a grid which has each one of the assessment activities listed, and then each of the fundamentals that not each of the fundamentals, but 3 of the fundamentals that I think are most involved and highlighted in this particular assessment activity. And then what I think an examiner would be looking for, what I would be looking for that would indicate success or a lack of success. And then finally, some thoughts I have about what might be good prescriptions for improvement. The grid is not complete because my own thinking is incomplete. And that's why I reached out to AJ and Zoe and said, hey, I'd like some help, kind of filling this out, but also thinking it through and checking my thinking to make sure that I'm on track.
Very cool. And I love what you sent us here. I like looking at things in this format, and I like that your brain works this way. And one thing that was super interesting for me is this felt like a window into your ski brain and your technical understanding and how you think about skiing. So it was cool for me to see this put on the page and feel like I was kind of getting a window into your ski brain for a moment, Chris. Zoe, when you think about the assessment activities and the Alpine fundamentals, you probably have some strong feelings about the assessment activities and how they could be used. Where does your brain go when you start to think about fundamentals and prioritizing one over another, or how you think about the blend of the fundamentals related to some of these activities?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid question. And I think it's also common, right? Looking at this is a very common thing that we see with instructors and candidates going to exams. We obviously are all going to have certain biases towards different fundamentals. And so different assessment activities, or what they've been called tasks or fundamental versatilities, or any sort of different things in the back in the past, they've been sort of designed to help us highlight certain fundamentals, but at the end of the day, we are still blending all of our fundamentals to achieve outcomes on the snow, right? And so we look at our performance guide. So you can find this on the Snow Pros website, and this is just for the technical Alpine side of a level 3, and it's essentially saying like what a successful candidate does to achieve their level 3 technical passing. Sorry, let me scroll down to level 3. And so a lot of the ways that this performance guide is written is by talking about what are successful performance contributors and what are unsuccessful performance contributors. And a lot of times what it talks about is the outcomes, right? The performance outcome. And so what's interesting is this one, it's on our assessment form, vary turn shape, turn size, and line as needed to prescribe or prescribed in all skier zones. And so in a lot of these successful performance contributors, outcome is put on here a ton. And so, Chris, when we come back to your document, we have different assessment activities that we use within an exam to really try and achieve specific outcomes, right? If we want to see you highlight a fundamental, or maybe we have noticed there's a deficiency that we want to verify if that's actually happening, we'll use an assessment activity to kind of highlight what we're looking for. And so while, yes, we can maybe say that we're looking at a specific fundamental, how we choose the outcome, how we choose the parameter of setting up each one of these activities is the key part that I think a lot of times our candidates don't always hone in on. It's really easy to say that a pivot slip requires separation, right? It's really easy to say that. However, a lot of times in pivot slips, what I see is I see candidates having a hard time releasing their skis at the same time, right? They usually have some sort of sequential movement. And that is also a big piece that I look for in a pivot slip. Granted, when we're looking at pivot slips, we're going to set a parameter about the outcome we want to achieve. And that's going to help give candidates an idea of sort of which fundamentals we're trying to highlight. But I think it's really easy. This is a great first step too, Chris. I love that, like, you know, we're linear. Human beings are linear, and so having a way to be like, oh, like it's definitely going to highlight these fundamentals is really important. But just remember, in the moment, the way activity is set up, the parameters that it's set up within, and the outcome we're trying to achieve on snow is going to help also for us to figure out which fundamentals we need to blend in a certain way, right? It's always we're blending those fundamentals to achieve an outcome. And so we have to know what that outcome is to work backwards towards the fundamentals. We can't just say, I'm going to go turn the heck out of my feet and hopefully I get to do a pivot slip, right? I need to know, like, oh, I'm going to stay in this corridor. I'm going to release my skis at the same time, and the separation is going to happen, you know, through my legs, right, with the femur and the hip socket. Right now, I know that's more of an outcome, more specific, and I know I need to blend certain fundamentals to achieve that outcome. So I think that's sort of the long answer of where my head goes for some of this.
Awesome.
Cool. Well,
Yeah,
let me just pick up on that a little bit, Zoe, because that's really helpful, and I think you're a couple of things. One is, right, it's about an outcome, and there's elements of that outcome that lead to success or maybe a deficiency. As you say, that's frankly, it helps me a lot with the performance guides because I'm not sure I was that clear when I approached the performance guide, and that makes them a little bit more useful. I think the other thing is that you're maybe choosing assessment activities to see where there might be a deficiency in the group of candidates, and to break that down a little bit. That's helpful to know, and I know that this is not in a gotcha kind of thing, but this is in that same vein. For me, I'd like, frankly, for my teaching to ideally help people succeed. So it's kind of cool to go, oh, look, AJ is picking a hop turn for a reason. I'm not only do I have to perform, but I really need to watch how people are performing their hop turns and then start to break that down and say, what does that tell me about how I might be able to make somebody successful with my teaching? So that's cool. Thanks.
yeah, and Zoe gave a very descriptive answer there of, kind of how we think about the fundamentals and the blending and how we can use them in assessment scenarios. But Chris, you keep coming back to this point of like, how do I get to a place where I'm really identifying what it is I want that person to affect change in to get the outcome that I'm looking for? And I think that that's kind of where we can start to open this discussion up and start to talk about cause and effect relationships and how to start to identify those. Because there is a point where, like, yes, we have this discussion of, okay, we have assessment activities that can highlight certain fundamentals or do highlight the blend of a certain fundamental. And that can be pretty obvious, but, that's not the whole picture. And maybe a prescription to have somebody be successful with the outcome we're looking for isn't necessarily related to the fundamental that we're highlighting or the parameter that we're choosing. And that kind of gets to be the sticky point of MA and prescription, right? And I'll bounce it back to Zoe here. Just a cause and effect relationship question, Zoe. Like, how do you start to go about like putting a picture together when you're assessing candidates? What are the things that are the techniques, the strategies that you're using to get to a place where you're feeling confident about what the cause and effect relationships are and where you're going to go with a prescription?
Hey, AJ, real quick, you may want to bring your microphone down.
Sorry, guys. Can you not hear me?
Much better.
Sorry.
Better. All good. So the cause and effect, right? I think it's like the basic of movement analysis for what we're doing. And as an examiner on the Hill, and I think Chris, this helps speak to a lot of your questions as far as like in the assessment. My process, and granted, this is not everybody's process, but in general, right, as an examiner, what I'm doing is I'm getting on the Hill with the candidates, and even from like the get-go, right, I'm trying to notice a lot of things, and my goal is to see as much as I can, and I'm not really putting any sort of like qualifications on it. I'm just trying to like gather information. Right. And so from the word go, I'm watching, especially in the technical world of things, right? I'm watching movements. I'm watching movements and I'm watching what the ski is doing on the snow. And so everybody's going to kind of come at movement analysis differently, right? Everybody kind of has their different process, whatnot. But at the end of the day, cause and effect is what we're doing to affect the outcome on the snow, right? To affect the tool. And so often at a level 3 level, we're looking for the ski to perform in very specific ways. And a lot of times that has to do with where in the turn the ski bends, where in the turn the ski's flat, the amount of edge angle, depending on where that happens in the turn. Sometimes like consistent turn shape or speed, some of those pieces, right? These outcomes are things that are consistent that I'm looking for. Already within a couple runs, I might start to pick out like, well, it doesn't really seem like this person is bending the ski at the apex of the turn, right? And maybe starting to see that. Or maybe this person, the ski is, tipping quite a bit more near the end of the turn, or something like that, right? I'm starting to see maybe there's some disconnects with what the ski performance is happening. So then I'm going to start working up the chain, and now I need to start trying to figure out why those things are happening. And then I also need to verify what I've seen. So as an examiner, it's so much different. Like as an instructor on the Hill, we do the movement analysis, right? We kind of figure out, hey, like this is maybe a deficiency that's happening. I need to come up with a prescription, right? As an examiner, yes, I am looking for deficiencies, but I'm also looking for efficiencies, right? I'm looking for, are they performing this to the level that is the national standard, right? And so I have that national standard in my head to compare to. And what I have to keep doing is I have to keep verifying what I've seen, right? Like we're all human. And so I can't just like look at it once and decide that's it. And so now I have all of these tools, which are the assessment activities, to verify the things that I've started to see, right? And so AJ, now I feel like I'm maybe moving a little bit away from your question, But for my process, right? So, and granted, we work as an examiner team, which is really helpful because some of us have different things that we look at. But then my process is, as I start to verify, right, maybe I am seeing that somebody is having a hard time like directing pressure to the outside ski like at apex, right? Maybe they're having a hard time doing that. And so then we will choose a specific assessment activity, and I will set parameters in a way that I can see if that's happening or not, right? You know, outside ski turn is a great way to see it, obviously, but we can choose an assessment activity that fits to that need. So let's say I maybe thought I saw that in a run. We go and do an assessment activity in a way where I've set some parameters of, you know, this is what I want to see the ski do in this size turn on this slope. I go and I demonstrate it, and I watch this person, and they show me that they have some ownership over that within this assessment activity, right? So now I can almost say, okay, so maybe what I saw in that last run was them warming up or them thinking about something else, right? They've shown me that they can adjust to the outcome that I'm asking them for, right? And so that's what's so cool about this process is, yes, we might pick up on certain things, but then all we're going to do is use the assessment activities to highlight different skill blending, which is the fundamentals, right? Let's say I want to see a little bit more leg rotation, or I want to see what amount of leg rotation you have, then yes, I'm probably going to choose something that helps to highlight that, like a hop turn or like a pivot slip, right? Just so that I can see where your range is and what you're capable of doing. Maybe I'm seeing that you have some fore aft balance that's affecting your rotation. And maybe I'm going to set up the parameters in a way like, okay, here's the corridor of a pivot slip, right? If your fore aft balance is affecting your rotation, I'm going to see that in a pivot slip. But maybe when you're off on a free run or warming up, you just ski in a different way that you like and is fun, and you do that. And so now I'm asking you to change it, be versatile, right? Be able to blend the fundamentals in a different way. And in that assessment activity, you're either showing me you can like blend the fundamentals in whatever way towards the desired outcome, or you maybe have some deficiencies there that are keeping you from doing that. And that's how I use those assessment activities and highlighting different fundamentals to like achieve my ability to assess somebody.
So I'll tell you that super helpful, super helpful. And yeah, I probably have been a little bit more, you can say linear, but sort of a little bit more coming at it from the other side, which is, okay, I got to perform this task, and so you're breaking that up and saying, no, that's not the examiner view, and it's helpful. Thank you. Can I take us to being a little more specific now, though? And so let me see if I'm asking my question correctly. What would you be seeing in a candidate's skiing that would say, we should do some hop turns?
I was gonna say, I can definitely take this one. You know, for me, a lot of times, hop turns, and this is going back to like what I see a lot of times in exams. To get more specific, generally when I see people that are unsuccessful at hop turns, there is some issue with a fore aft balance thing going on. Not always, right? But usually there's an issue with fore aft balance. Now, how that manifests in their skiing and the movements that create that can be very different. Sometimes we see people that are just generally too far aft on their skis, right? And that's usually not going to set them up for landing in the center of their skiing, being in a place where they can control their speed. But getting back to like cause and effect relationships within the fundamentals, I also see people that have issues with fore aft balance because they don't separate their upper and lower bodies well enough, and that makes it hard for them to keep up with their skis. So there are a lot of different things that we could maybe say, I'll pick this parameter to use hop turns to assess. But when I see a candidate that is having issues with fore aft balance, hop turns are usually a really good verifier of that. Like I said, and Zoe made a great point when she was talking about how she uses the assessment activities to assess candidates' skillfulness. You know, based on how we set up the activity and the parameters that we put on it, we could be looking at a lot of different things in those hop turns. There's a lot of things about the fundamentals and skillfulness within the fundamentals that make hop turns successful or unsuccessful. And I think going back to your sheet, you really nailed a couple of them. You know, pressure management is a big one. We talked
Okay.
about, Zoe, do you mind bringing that up? Yeah, pressure management's a big one, and center of mass over the base of support. You know, those two, you know, pressure management, I'm kind of uh, interpreting that as the magnitude of pressure. But
Correct.
really, you know, when you get into center of mass over base of support, Chris, like that is a pressure control fundamental. So, um, like that pressure management piece is bigger than just the magnitude, right? And
Right.
then, you know, getting to your third fundamental there, the upper lower body separation, you know, a lot of times, and like I said, not all the time, but when I see issues that people have balancing along the length of their skis, especially in a hop turn, it can be created by a lack of lower and or upper lower body separation. Um, so that's kind of the easy like give me on hop turns, and we could get into, you know, the discussion over, well, you know, hop turns are great for seeing somebody's edge control because they really need to be able to have or have ownership of edging skills down low to be able to set that edge, and not have their skis slide when they land, right, or slip when they land. um, you know, we could say that it's crucial for somebody in an out or in a hop turn to be able to land with pressure directed to their outside ski, because if their pressure management ski to ski, if they don't have ownership of those skills, they're not going to be landing in a place where they can manage the magnitude of that pressure and get back off of their skis and up off the snow in a timely manner. If they're not balanced foot to foot, we usually see that kind of weird pause thing going on where there's not that rhythm and flow to their hop turns.
Huh.
So we could go down the rabbit hole and get into that discussion, but I think where you went with your three kind of main fundamentals is where my assessment brain would go if I was going to verify some skills with a candidate. I might use hop turns to highlight some of the fundamentals that you've laid out here in your sheet. So I think that your
Cool.
brain, as far as, and you know, a lot of these like come down to some bias, but as far as the way that your brain has kind of worked through how to prioritize some of the fundamentals in these activities, I think that, you know, you're on the right track here. There are some things that you know, we could get into a little bit more specific discussion and start to debate some of our biases, but I think that for
Yeah.
the most part you're kind of on the right track here.
So let me just kind of moving through here a little bit. One of the questions I had was, and now again, I'll try and say this in the way, why would you, as an examiner, choose one skiing versus one ski side hill shorts? What does one tell you that the other doesn't?
Zoe, would you like to weigh in on that?
And it's okay if it doesn't, it's fine, but I'm just
Well,
curious.
I think it's going to be, it depends, right? And so um there are similarities with both those things, because obviously it's a one ski drill, and so we're gonna be seeing some finer motor skills down low, to manage balance, to manage pressure, and to manage like some tipping movements as well. The side hill short turns are going to require some more accuracy sometimes, especially in those tipping movements, I find, and how those affect your rotational movements. I feel like a short turn in like one ski going down the hill, down the fall line, right? It's a lot easier to have a consistent amount of tipping and amount of rotation both ways. And on a side hill, you're going to have to adjust for that a little bit. And so I think it just almost like narrows down the view for me to a little bit more of what you're doing down low. Um, it's not saying one is better than the other. I think sometimes they're just going to slightly highlight different things. Like if I'm looking more for some of your lower, and this is just once again me and kind of like how I would look at it, right? If I'm looking at more of your lower leg kind of tipping control, I think a side hill short turn is really awesome. If I'm looking about how you can maybe manage some rotation while tipping, maybe I'm going to just have you do some, one skiing in a short turn. AJ, you might be able to add to that.
Yeah, I was just gonna jump in and say like, and Zoe was getting at what I would say is my one word answer would be versatility. Not that they are necessarily so different that um, they require different blends for a slightly different outcome on the snow, because you're not going straight down the fall line, and you're trying to keep that turn shape moving across the fall line. So like for me, I might pick one or the other, and if I see something out of a candidate that I need to verify, then I might use the other activity to start to verify some of the assumptions that I'm making. But my short answer, my one word answer would be it's versatility. They are very much the same. And there's a point about one skiing and the assessment activities in general that I'll make here in a second, but um, I see them as verification tools. If I see something in one, then I can use the other to kind of verify what I've seen, or verify my assumptions about a candidate. And this kind of brings me back to another point, and a little bit of what I think you're trying to get at, Chris, with how to think about these assessment activities, and kind of something that I was picking up on from your spreadsheet that you made. Certain fundamentals are designed, or certain assessment activities, excuse me, are designed in a way to highlight certain fundamentals, but then there are assessment activities that we talk about as more blended, right? And I think of no poles lane change, or like one skiing. um, One skiing in particular is kind of an interesting example, because it is a blended task, but we kind of, instead of highlighting a fundamental, we kind of take a fundamental away, right? We take away that weight transfer and see if you still have the ability to blend the others, right? So when you're looking at these fundamentals, I kind of like think of them almost in like three categories. As like, some highlight a fundamental, others will like take a fundamental away and see if you can still blend. And then other fundamentals are really like a blended task, like a lane change. Like, what is your ability to affect the blend of all of them in certain ways, without necessarily highlighting one or another. I know some people in lane change might make an argument for like highlighting maybe center of mass of base of support, because of directional movement could be so important to be successful in that one. But I kind of see that as like a truly blended task instead of a highlighted task. Does that make sense, Chris?
It does, and I this is the one you kind of went to, the one where you can see I've got question marks. Like I'm not sure I really understand. Having now passed my level 2, I guess I can admit this. I'm not sure I really understand the point of lane changes. And then now we're taking away poles. So let's go back to let me ask the question the way I think, what would you be seeing that would cause you to choose no poles, tempo, lane changes as a way to verify or to reveal something?
Yeah, I'll jump in there right away with lane changes. Personally, to me, one of my favorite tasks. They're near and dear to my heart. I love lane changes. Um, And when I'm thinking about a successful lane change with poles or without poles, and when you talk about the no poles version at level 3, really what we're doing is we're just upping the skillfulness by taking away your balance aid. But really the goal of the task, or what we're looking at, or what I'm looking at in the task, and I'll have Zoe weigh in maybe, and we'll get a window into some of her biases um, next. But I'm looking for continuous movement throughout the tempo changes, right? So a big indicator for me in successfulness or unsuccessfulness when I'm looking at lane changes, besides just like some of the outside parameters of, we want the lanes to be vertical, and we want them to be parallel, and we want them to be spaced the same apart, and the same distance down the hill, all of those things about turn shape. I'm looking for continuous movement. So in that tempo change from short turns to medium radius turns, I want to see the candidate be able to move along the length of the ski and not just traverse across the hill to their second set of short turns. Now, like I said, there's other pieces to being successful. I kind of talked about those more tactical pieces, turn shape and line choice and all that stuff. But that's the big one for me. If I'm seeing parallel lanes and that everything is nice and they're in the corridors and the turn shape's right and the speed control's there, the big thing for me is like, okay, is this a passing or a not passing? Is that candidate able to move through that tempo change and adjust their duration, intensity, rate, and timing as they move into their medium radius turns? And that's kind of why I see that one as a little bit more of a blended task, is because we're really adjusting the overall blend to achieve a successful outcome instead of just highlighting or taking away a fundamental to see if I have skillfulness in blending the others. Zoe, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think Chris, it was interesting because you keep asking, like, what would you see in a candidate that then you would choose to do that assessment activity. Lane changes, man, I love them. I love them so much. I do agree with AJ that it shows a lot of versatility. I think that's why they're a great tool. The other cool thing about this that I was just thinking about, especially for your spreadsheet and your training purposes, is when I see something that leads me to want to use this assessment activity, that's also something that could be used as a training tool as well, which is really awesome.
And that's what I took from AJ.
Exactly. And so if I am seeing some candidates who there's a whole, like, kind of a range of things, especially for lane changes, but let's say they have a hard time maintaining a consistent speed, especially in a certain size of turn. Or maybe I've only seen them make kind of one size or shape of turn. Or maybe I have seen that they have a hard time making a direction change on the fly. Like if something was in their way or something that it kind of threw them off. These would all be indicators that maybe their ability to change their shape, size, turn, all that sort of stuff, kind of vary their blend. And a lot of it, like lane changes, come down to dirt a ton, right? Duration, intensity, rate, and timing. We are blending all of the skills. I do agree with AJ that there's a lot of like blending of all the skills, but the dirt changes, which is why I think moving along the length of the ski comes out as one of those highlighted pieces, because when we change dirt, that is sometimes the hardest one for people to really get, is how much I need to like move across the hill with the ski, right? And that's kind of like moving our center of mass through space is the thing that sometimes like we get caught up on. And so anytime when I see that somebody is not really being able to redirect their movement in a different way, then I'm certainly going to throw in some lane changes to see, like, is that a consistent piece, or was it maybe just a fluke, or, you know, just that would be my way to verify. I also think that it's a great way to train to, and it's interesting, you know, not everybody listening to this is going to be aware, but Chris, you and I did some sink skiing last season on a sink skiing team, and
Right.
and what's really interesting is a lot of sink skiing, like a lot of those passes, there are lane changes in them. And as those of us who have done a little sink skiing, we found like sometimes when you're following someone, it's a little bit harder to like, you know, mirror their movements. And I think the more we get, the more we're able to blend our skills on the fly and be able to make those adjustments quickly. Like you'll find that sink skiing becomes easier too, right? You'll be able to match somebody's movements easier. And so there's a lot of different ways to use these things and to train towards them. But I think at the end of the day, like for me to choose an assessment activity, it's because I have seen a candidate either only blend a fundamental in a certain way, or they're having a hard time achieving a skill blend for a certain ski outcome, right? Maybe they can't get the ski performance. And so some of those things are how I start to think back and then choose that assessment activity that will help me verify what I'm seeing. And
Yeah,
remember, it's not like to like throw a wrench in it for them, right? Like the goal is just to like, am I actually seeing what I'm seeing? And here are all these tools that we can use to verify and kind of zoom in on those pieces.
so thank you. Actually, that's really helpful because that puts a number of pieces together around lane changes. And yeah, the sync skiing comparison is a really good one. And what I'm hearing kind of from both of you is that if you're seeing, as people are, as candidates or are in an assessment, are maybe they're able to do one turn, but the circumstance, the conditions, require a change to be, to expand a turn, to shorten it, to whatever, that versatility that the terrain is calling for, and that they struggle with it. They lose a little bit of their turn shape. It gets a little Z-shaped or something. It just, the transition is no longer smooth as it was when they were doing a sequence of turns. That says, maybe there's a challenge with applying dirt, and specifically, you both said keeping up with the ski as you're making a change in the turn shape, size, speed, whatever. That makes a lot of sense. The other is just where I went was, wow, you could really use this as a teaching opportunity too, in an exam, and say, let's go back to lane changes and you could really see how I can help somebody, or even myself, with, I wasn't feeling it or I wasn't seeing it, and let's do them again, but let's do them again coached, and to where this more specific gap might be. And that's a cool. All right, well, let me go to another one that I've had probably the least amount of experience with, and that is skate to shape to short. And this is the one where I've been out with both of you guys and others around, but I'm not quite sure. I have a sense of that there's three pieces here, and that identifies three different kind of ski performances and body movements necessary to achieve that. But I'll go back to, what are you seeing in the candidates that would say, I want to do skate to shape to short to verify?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, skate to shape to short. This is another. I love this task. I will say that I don't know that I like it quite as much as lane changes, just because lane changes always feel so fun, and skate to shape to short is one of those where it doesn't always feel the greatest, right? And there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think the short answer for this one, Chris, is it's a lot like lane changes, in the sense that there's three things going on. They happen in segments, kind of more like you would think of a short swing to a performance short. They're two separate outcomes that we're looking for. But really, moving between the activities, we can talk about each activity individually and the fundamentals that we might be highlighting in each one of the activities. But really, as we're moving from each activity and we're adjusting that blend, one big thing that I'm looking for to verify success in this, as people are adjusting blend, is that there's consistent speed control throughout, and that as they're moving from activity to activity, they're not continuing to pick up speed and pick up speed and pick up speed, and that they're able to adjust the blend right away, and that it doesn't take them time to move from activity to another, so that their skates don't bleed into their shapes, and their shaping doesn't bleed into their short turns, that they have the skills to show me 3 separate activities and move between those activities with consistent speed control. And so if I'm looking at a candidate and I'm seeing some things that I might want to verify with this activity, maybe I'm looking at another task where they're performing 2 separate activities, say a short swing to a performance short. And I see that, okay, in the short swing, when they're setting their edges, they have pretty good speed control, but it takes them a while to move into what looks like a performance short turn. And that by the end of their performance short turns, they're really not blending the skills in a way that's creating a round turn that has speed control
Mhm.
as part of the outcome. And so um, usually I'm looking, or when I'm using this task to verify, it's when candidates have issues changing up their blend, and I can see that result in some speed control issues, and not having clear defined breaks between the separate tasks, that they're not able to affect that blend immediately. It takes them a while to kind of move into something that would look like a skate or a shape, or moving from a short swing to a performance short. Zoe, do you have anything to add to that? I'm sure you do.
And I also love skate to shape short. So what's interesting about skate to shape to short, and for those who are listening who aren't fully familiar, right, each region kind of will use a little bit of different assessment activities. We're kind of starting on a little bit of a flatter terrain, doing generally like skating down the fall line. And then we move into a shaping phase where it starts with a little bit of a skate, but we move towards, the inside edge, the big toe edge, and we actually get that ski to bend and shape a little bit. And then we move into like a high performance short turn, generally over a head wall, into like a steeper pitch. And so the interesting thing that I find about skate shape short, and this is once again going back to how you can utilize these assessment activities to train as well, is that a skate to shape to short for me very much also highlights a certain part of the turn. I feel like it highlights a lot of times our transition in the beginning part of our turn, and how we move to and with that new outside ski. I think it's really important. Like so often, so once again, Chris, you kind of asked like, why would we use skate to shape to short? If I am seeing that a candidate is maybe having a hard time with how they direct pressure the new outside ski, and then also how they then begin to tip and move along with it, right? Like kind of like that, those sequences, especially like near the start of the turn, because all of that really matters if I'm going to be able to create like a high performance shaped short turn that is consistent in speed, right? If I can't like stand on it, tip it, and kind of move with it, pressure it effectively, I'm going to get behind it, right? And so a skate to shape to short really shows me, helps like kind of highlight those pieces if I'm thinking that that might be somewhere where somebody's struggling. And so this is maybe, once again, how different examiners will see things a little bit differently. But I think a skate to shape to short will really like a lot of times highlight a part of our turn and how it affects the rest of it, kind of that cause and effect piece. And if you get to that short turn and you can't control your speed anymore, then there's probably something missing. And when we separate out the skate and the shape, it really allows us as assessors to see some of those pieces broken down, if that makes
So
sense.
where I go, thank you. Actually, that both of you guys, that's really helpful to see because, what this does is it emphasizes the start of the turn, the tipping and bending, the initial tipping and bending, and you can see it. And if you're not successful with that in the skate to shape, then you're not going to have a performance turn. You're just, you're going to have some other shape of turn, but it's not going to be a consistent arc, performance turn. And cool. That's actually really helpful. Thank you. That I had not put those things together. I'm not sure how much time we have here, but I wouldn't mind going back to one of the assessment activities, AJ, which actually you and I have spent some time on, and that's wedge hops. And a lot of where I go with with wedge hops for me, and I think one of the reasons you took me to wedge hops was that really being quiet with my upper body while moving pressure from ski to ski, and really, having that be a motion down low, and without coming up. And that's, but it's a, and we've done some things, we use like dynamic wedges, I think in particular for that, but you pushed me on wedge hops, as well. And I think where I'm going, kind of coming back now to our initial conversation around hop turns, is some of that is also keeping up with the ski and the center of mass over the base of support consistently. As you guys have said very clearly throughout all these, it's about blending, but that there's both of those things going on at the same time. And so those are connections I made just now as we're talking. So I'd love to hear you just kind of confirm I'm down a good path, on number one. But then number two, kind of the same sort of question. If you saw somebody, what would you see in a candidate or candidates that would say, let's do some wedge hops, not so much hop turns?
Yeah, I'll go in and go ahead and jump in on that one. I actually personally prefer wedge hops to hop turns. That's a personal bias. I'm not going to say that across the board they're better. One reason why I prefer them, and I may get some pushback on this, but I believe that they can show you a lot of the same skills that you can see in a regular hop turn without requiring the same level of athleticism. I feel like there's a strength, and particularly like around explosive strength and kind of plyometric strength, element to hop turns that doesn't necessarily show us the skillfulness of the candidate. So that's a piece of those two when I'm thinking about what the difference is and why I might choose one or the other. I like to lean towards wedge hops because I can see in a candidate that may not have the same body strength, that there could be a high level of skillfulness in the things that I'm trying to verify. Um, and they may not be able to show me those skills in a hop turn just due to the athleticism that is required, to get both skis across the fall line and pointed in the same direction without sliding. So that's kind of my quick answer there. Um, as far as like wedge hops and your personal discussion about where your brain is going, I think that you're headed in the right direction with your thinking on those and how to be successful. And you personally, like we have had a lot of discussions about how to be successful with those, but I'll just go back and echo what I see a lot of times, and generalization, right? This is kind of like, those common things that we see from students and candidates. They're not absolute truths, but we lean on them a lot because people end up moving their bodies in similar ways sometimes. So, um, that upper lower body separation piece is huge to a couple of things that you've highlighted there in your hop turns, that ski to ski pressure and keeping your center of mass over your base of support. If you're taking the time to rotate your body to point in the way that your tips are pointing, that extra movement can create pressure control issues and can create balance issues, side to side and fore aft. So having that upper lower body separation, and like you said, that core stability where we're traveling straight down the hill, that really allows us to be landing in a place on our ski where we can have a successful outcome when we're looking at these hopping drills. So I would say yes, like confirmation, your brain is thinking about how to, the cause and effect relationships within the fundamentals and how to be successful. I think that you're starting to think about those in a way that is going to be beneficial to your training when you're out there on the hill. And yeah, as far as the difference between the two of them, wedge hops I feel like is a much more accessible way for us to assess the skillfulness of a candidate, in a way that's similar to hop turns, but doesn't require a baseline strength that may detract from their performance.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So I'm mindful that we're close to the top of the hour, and I think I've gotten well, you know, can I go for one more?
Please do.
So, and that's white pasterns, you know, and I guess the journey of the inside leg, right? And I think some of my confusion about white pasterns goes back to, you know, this framing that we've kind of adopted. What would you see in a candidate that would cause you to say, I'd like us to do white pasterns so I can confirm, you know, what I'm seeing or not, or whatever. But I have heard so many different ways of there being success in achieving white pasterns that I'm not sure I fully grasp what success is. So that's just a sort of a technical, you know, doing the task question. But let's start with the first one. What would be going on with your candidates that would cause you to say, I'm going to have us do some white pasterns?
Yeah, I can jump in again. I love that you're hitting on all of my favorite tasks. White pass turn white pass turns are another personal favorite of mine. Um, I think that I'm going to start by tackling this from the back end and answering your first question first. You know, a successful white pass turn. Generally, in the past, at least in our division in NRM, um, there's been a tendency to do a white pass turn, and usually how we do a white pass turn is usually in a more high performance, high speed, carved like GS radius type turn, you know, somewhere on intermediate terrain, groomed intermediate terrain, right? Pretty consistent pitch, you know, nothing too crazy thrown at you. Um, there are versions of white pass turns, and I like doing versions of white pass turns where we uh, choose a much more steered ski performance outcome where we're not carving that ski as much. We're rotating that ski on the snow. So to be successful in a white pass turn is really what it is it's a delayed weight transfer, right? We're switching edges before we're putting weight on our outside foot. That's really what it is. It's technically, I guess, a little more complicated than that, but that's the essence of the drill. So what we're looking is that can you get on your new edges before you set your outside ski down, and when you set your outside ski down, do you have the balance and the control to put that outside ski down without it coming down as part of your body settling or some sort of abrupt movement, right? Can you control the movement of your body through the top part of that turn as you put your ski down? Things that I would be like if I was going to choose white pass turns to verify some things that I was seeing with a candidate. Um, there are a lot of things that could make a white pass turn unsuccessful, but generally when I see a candidate unsuccessful at that white pass turn, they're unable to get that inside foot tipped, but it's more of a product or a effect of how they're moving their body into the top of that turn, right? So you know, going back to some of the things we talked about in lane changes and in our skate to shape to short, um, if I see somebody that has problems directing pressure to the outside ski, that they're constantly stuck on their inside ski and they're not able to release their skis and tip at the top of the turn while directing pressure to that outside ski, I might have them take that outside ski out of the equation and see what happens when they're trying to tip and balance on that inside ski. Um, yes, like we're not directing pressure to the outside ski right away in a white pass turn, but we still need to be moving into that turn in a way that we could balance over that outside ski if it was there for us, right? We don't change how our center of mass moves into the top of the turn. So if I'm seeing somebody that has problems at the top of the turn with their ski performance, they don't tip their skis as they move into the top of the turn, and there's a lot of funny stuff going on where there's some rotation happening at the top of the turn and they're not able to really stand on that outside ski and get it tipped, then I'm going to go to a white pass turn to kind of verify some of the things that I'm seeing out on the mountain and other places. Zoe, what would you have to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely echo plenty of what AJ said. White pass is always an interesting one because I think ski instructors in particular get really caught up on it because we just preach directing pressure to the outside ski. And when we're like, all right, start the turn without the outside ski, everybody's like, well, I'm not supposed to do that. So what's interesting though is at a high level, right, especially at a level 3, which is why this is a level 3 assessment activity, there is other things going on when we direct pressure to the outside ski. And I think it's really easy to overlook other pieces of the top of the turn. And in response to that, it's going to affect how we direct pressure to the outside ski, and it's going to affect what's happening at apex. And so the interesting thing about a white pass turn that I really like to kind of focus in on is, like AJ said, a big part is how that outside ski then comes in to contact with the snow. So often you see people kind of like just like throwing it down, or like it, it's pretty abrupt, all these different pieces that kind of show me as far as where their movements are taking them, where their balance is, how their control is on that inside foot. The other piece that would kind of lead me to want to try some white pass turns is when somebody skis very like two-legged, right? We talk a lot about independent like leg movements in skiing, especially at a higher end. Your legs are probably going to be doing different things depending on what outcome you're trying to achieve. And we also hear a lot of things about like long leg, short leg, all this sort of stuff. Like there's all these different things that we at a high level with a high ski performance outcome are going to want to see our legs do independently. And so often we see instructors depend a lot on both of their legs to really kind of like achieve like the balance and the centrifugal force that they need to do things. And so taking a crutch away is a great way to highlight and see how some of those things are actually happening. And so I think a white pass certainly highlights a lot of how we're moving into a turn, especially as far as like independently what those legs are doing.
So let me just kind of restate and see if I'm getting it. What I'm hearing is that by taking the outside ski out of play in the turn initiation, the inside ski has a really important role in turn initiation, and you're able to see that happening successfully. And then even though all the pressure is on that inside ski, actually, it still is, you're able to see the tipping and the bending that's needed from the inside ski, and particularly at the start of the turn. And then what I'm also hearing is the ability, as you get into the turn, particularly towards apex, where you need to you're more, flexing the inside, that then you're able to set the inside ski, the outside ski, or have it engaged with the snow, kind of naturally and smoothly as it would in a turn. But that the primary point is, and it is counterintuitive, you're right, okay, we're putting all the pressure on the inside ski to highlight what it needs to do and to be able to see what it needs to be able to do at turn initiation and going into apex. Right? Is that a fair restatement?
Yeah, and I think you said that well. And the other piece that I really love about this assessment activity is it's really fun to look at the history of it, right? Like where the white pass turn came from. And it came from the Mayer brothers and in a racing context. And it was used when they needed to like make up time or got late for a gate. And so it was a tactical way to blend some skills for them to achieve an outcome on the snow, right? And so what's really awesome is like that's such a practical way that this activity was used to achieve an outcome. And so here, once again, it's just being used as a way to vary how we blend the fundamentals to see can we be versatile? Can we achieve certain outcomes? And do we have the skillfulness to do that? And so I think White Pass is such a cool activity that we use because its origin is of a very practical reason why you would need some versatility in your skill blending. So I think it just highlights, you know, we're not like the assessment activities are really there to show versatility and to highlight the different skill blend so that we can achieve outcomes on the snow.
Cool.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in there and make one last point with white pass turns, just because I love them so much too. And I think one thing that we lose in the fundamentals is there's they're specific in certain ways, but there's room for variability and interpretation, and that's why we can see so many different pictures of what we call good skiing and describe them with the fundamentals and have them look so different. And the fundamental doesn't say anything about when you direct pressure the outside ski. It just says control pressure ski to ski and direct pressure to the outside ski. So um, white pass turns is a great example of how we can play with the fundamentals in a way that maybe we wouldn't say is ideal, but is still described by the fundamentals, and we can still measure skillfulness in a very effective way. So I love white pass turns, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I don't want to keep you guys, but I got notes all over my spreadsheet here and stuff. But I think there's first, thank you. It's really cool. But what comes, I think the framing that Zoe you started out with, super helpful. I mean that you know that helps with the exam sort of setting. Plus, it also, you know, I mean, I was riffing on how I might bring some of this into teaching. But more importantly, I think on the several of these we talked about, all of them actually, blending and versatility was the key. And it's certain areas you might see something that is happening, which is, you know, that the discussion we had about lane change is really good. You're seeing, okay, somebody's nice consistent turns in a quarter, conditions, you know, you have to make a change, but they lose that turn shape, or, you know, or success, or their back, whatever it is, you know, but that's a blending issue. It's a timing issue. It's a dirt issue, potentially. I want to see more. But that it's about versatility and blending in so many respects than it is about, okay, I want to see somebody control the center of mass to direct pressure along the base of support. That's, so I think that's not the frame, that's not the right way to think about this. That's super helpful. Super helpful. Thank you.
I think, you know, Chris, that was a great restating too. And I think the really awesome thing about the direction that we're moving in nationally and how we are framing via like assessment criteria, assessment activities, the great thing about it is in the past, it was really maybe easy to fall into the training towards an activity, right? Like, this is the way you do a pivot slip, and I'm going to train to that, right? And so what that is doing is it's actually limiting versatility. Now it's saying like, okay, this is the one way you do this thing. This is the one way you blend the fundamentals. I'm going to do it only that way. Now, and that's never been what we're looking for. Now we're framing things in a more clear way so that candidates can understand that we're looking for blending, we're looking for versatility, and the outcome may change, right? Like, I'm not going to want the same outcome on the snow when I'm skiing a, you know, groomed blue run versus the big couloir, you know. Those are different outcomes on the snow. I'm still using all 5 fundamentals and I'm still blending them, right? But just in a very different way. And it's dictated by the outcome I'm trying to achieve. And so it's so important when you're going to train that you know what outcome you want to achieve. And that outcome is something that the ski is doing on the snow, right? It's not, the outcome isn't the perfect pivot slip. The outcome is maybe that the tail follows the path of the tip of this, you know, through the snow, or, you know, something like that. And you can utilize different ways of doing a pivot slip to gain some more skillfulness so that you have maybe an appropriate skill blend of rotation for that, whatever it might be. But it's all about, yes, the versatility, the blending towards an outcome. Know what you're training towards.
Great.
Cool. Well, it has been wonderful to spend the last hour with you guys geeking out on the Alpine fundamentals. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that we get to do this again soon. And for all of you out there watching, um, be sure to check out our YouTube channel for all of our other content that we have up, and stay tuned for more content throughout the fall. We will be actively putting up stuff as we get closer to the season to get you guys primed for being on snow and excited about being back out there and doing what you do and doing what we all love. So thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us. If you guys have anything else to add before we sign off, I think we'll end it there.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for bringing the conversation up.
Hey, thank you guys for responding. This is cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.